Hello, hello, wonderful mamas. Welcome back to the podcast. It has been a week, actually, several weeks for me. I can tell you, life is lifing. When we say life is 50-50, believe that shit because life is lifing for your girl here. So, on top of trying to get my car repaired, I had to spend $5,000 today, which is a large amount to fix the engine on my SUV. So that has been a challenge in itself. And I'm telling you, on top of being a single special needs mom and working and doing all the things, I'm fucking tired. In a nutshell, I'm tired. So those are kind of some of the things. So if you haven't checked out the prior episode, I did an amazing episode with my guest, Julia Pierce. Amazing mom. She tells a story about her son. So make sure you check out the prior episode. Great conversation. Hope to have Julia back on the podcast on a future episode real soon. So just an amazing woman. So in today's episode, I figure we talk about from breaking up to determination when it comes to divorce. Divorce is not an ending. So I kind of want to touch on that because divorce is very realistic in my life because I've been divorced for 5 years. I have navigated through the challenges, the feelings, the thoughts, the negativity, the backlash when it came to divorcing my ex-husband. And it is something that can take a toll on you. I mean, 100%, because people are going to come at you negatively. People are going to say things about you. People are going to think you're crazy. You will get a lot of resentment from your ex. And it brings up all those feelings of, was I a good person? Was I a good wife? Why did this end? And divorce looks different for everybody. Okay. It looks a lot different for everybody. So I'm going to share my story as far as divorce because it's very relevant when it comes to my podcast and just for you listening out there. So if this is your first time listening to me, I've been divorced since 2019. I was the one that filed for divorce from my ex-husband. I was married for 10 years. I have a stepdaughter and then 2 daughters that are special needs with my ex-husband. Upon taking the responsibility of raising a daughter that wasn't mine, I took on that responsibility because at the time her mother was going through some very tough challenges and trusted me to make sure that her daughter had everything she needed and that she was safe. My marriage wasn't one of those that was happy-go-lucky. Not to say that everybody's marriage is happy-go-lucky because you have ups and downs. Well, there were a lot of downs, very few ups. And this came full circle when we found out that our first child together had a lot of medical complexities. And then our last child, of course, has autism. So as parents, it is very stressful when it comes to having a marriage and a relationship and dealing with children who really need a lot of your attention. And they require so many needs and they require therapies, they require medications and all these things that goes with being a special needs parent. Now, I can tell you, we argued a lot. We did. And the way that my marriage kind of started at the end, when it started going downhill, because I knew there were red flags. And my podcast is about being open and transparent. There were red flags, but of course, when we feel love for somebody and we're in that relationship and we care about people or we care about that person, we tend to ignore the red flags. Okay. And I ignored all of them. So the downfall was because he felt that he wasn't being appreciated. He wasn't being listened to. And as much as I tried, it was never good enough. It was never good enough. I wasn't a good mother. I wasn't trying hard. I wasn't doing this. But let's also be devil's advocate and look at the flip side. I was working 10, 12 hours a day, trying to keep health insurance on our children because they had one has a lot of medical complications. So you do what any good parent does is try to do your best and be present with them. Not to say that I didn't have faults. I didn't do a lot of things right because I didn't. And to say that I failed as a mother, I don't think so. I made a lot of mistakes. I didn't fail as their mom. I really didn't. But those are things that were told to me, through the process. And then once, that relationship is so broken and you can't even repair it. I remember going to therapy with my ex-husband. And I sat there with the therapist and I was very honest about all the things that were going on in our marriage. He really didn't want to participate in that. And I say that just with all honesty, because he sat there and really didn't let the therapist really give him the questions so that he can answer. Now, typically people are going to say that's narcissistic and you're 100% right. Now, to say, I know I have a tendency where people speak and sometimes I'm like trying to talk over them. It's because I come from a very large Hispanic family where we talk over each other because everybody wants to be heard. But I can tell you my inner child, as far as what I experienced as a child, I was seen but not heard. And then when I tried to voice when something was wrong or bothering me, I was told to be quiet. That's just how it was. Okay. So upon ending and just going through the different types of arguments and the constant, back and forth and the constant name calling and all these other things that were going on, you get fed up. I got fed up and I got tired. I filed for divorce. Now, just because you file for a divorce, that's not an easy fix. When I did that, I felt the world was ending. Like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I'm going to be a single mom with kids and they require all these needs. Like, I don't have a proper setup. I don't have this. I don't have that. Mind you, I had no savings. I had no place to live. And I had no job at that time because I had gotten fired for attendance because I was going through the motions and I was just tapped out and emotionally drained. I was just going to work and just doing my job and showing up that I didn't even acknowledge that I had missed so many days in a week. And the hospital I worked at, they had a strict attendance policy. They pulled me into the office and told me, sorry, we got to let you go. Like that hit me like a train, knowing that I had lost my job. I was going through a divorce. I was constantly getting belittled and yelled at by my ex-husband all the time and telling me how I needed to leave. Those are the realities of what I went through in my marriage. So to know that I had to figure out where I was going to work next, figure out how I was going to put food on the table and just continue to provide for my kids, along with my stepdaughter, it just puts you in a state of depression and survival. And I can tell you during that time, I was in a very dark place. It was just so hurtful because it's not that any amount of counseling would have helped. And I thought divorce was the end. Like my life was going to end. I didn't know what I was going to do. I had no fucking clue what the next step was. Now, when I moved out and I got this little 2-bedroom apartment and I had no idea what kind of setup I needed, because when it came to all those things, I was not involved in it because my ex-husband took over that stuff because I was always working. But then I was told that I worked too much and I cared too much about my job. Now, I know you all are listening, and it's nothing to bash. This is my story. This is what I went through. Naturally, there's a lot of anger that comes out of that. And how could you say that? Well, if I'm doing such a bad job, then why don't you go out and go to work and I will stay home with the kids? Was always my answer. But that's never what happened. So naturally, when I was out on my own and I had to figure these things out, and I tried to be cordial with him and saying, listen, I need help. Can you help me out? The door would get slammed in my face. And I was told, you need to figure it out on your own. I can tell you that was probably one of the most earth-shattering things I could have heard. Like, this was somebody I was married to. This is somebody that I had history with, to tell me that because I am no longer living in the same household, we are no longer married anymore. This is over. You need to figure it out. And I'm going to be really honest. Yes, I did have to figure it out on my own. I just needed a little help so that we could be on the same page when it came to our kids. Unfortunately, it was just a one-sided thing. It was me figuring out how to do routines, schedules, and things, and a good setup for my kids. Now, I'm not saying from the last, 2 to 3 years after I was divorced, I didn't do everything right. I didn't. There was a lot of arguments. There was a lot of fighting. There was a lot of blame thrown around. But I can tell you that I had to make a choice because my ex-husband is a difficult person to communicate with. Okay. It is difficult when you try to have a conversation, which is two ways. He asks you a question, you try to respond, and you can only get 2 words in and you're cut off. When you deal with people's different personalities, a lot of people like to throw around narcissism, narcissistic tendencies, things like that. I can honestly tell you, yes, my ex-husband has narcissistic tendencies, and he's very predictable. You can predict exactly how he's going to act, what he's going to say, and what he's going to do. And those are the red flags that I picked up on after my daughter, Sophia, was born. I noticed that everything has to be in his control, and that it was his way or no way. So what I'm trying to get across is that you might have experienced a similar situation like this. You might be going through a similar situation like this. It's not the end. Because what I came to find out is when I started working on myself, I started healing, I started doing things that I enjoyed again. I went out there and said, well, maybe I should put myself back out there in dating, which I'm always going to tell you the honest truth. Make sure that you're truly ready. Okay. Because we all know what that dating culture is, which that's a topic for another time. But make sure that you're ready to be out there so you can have those healthy relationships. You can co-parent effectively, because not every co-parenting story is like mine. Some people have positive co-parenting stories. Some people, after they get divorced, they're friendly and they actually are better parents. I wish I could have that kind of co-parenting journey in that collaboration. Will that ever happen? Probably not. So that's why I always share on my episodes that boundaries are a beautiful thing. And honestly, a lot of times you have to pick and choose your battles. You really, really do. Because instead of arguing with somebody who likes conflict, they like drama, and they like to just create, just this negative energy, you have to pick and choose your battles. But you have to remember the boundaries are for you, not for them. Okay? And you can't control what they do. I can't control what my ex-husband does as far as what happens when the children are with him. All I can do is make sure I create that safe, positive environment for them when they are with me. And honestly, divorce was a beginning for me. It was to reclaim my power. It was to reclaim who I am again, but better. It was to make sure that, hey, I can stand on my own 2 feet. I'm not all these things that this person says about me. And just because our marriage didn't work out, that doesn't define me. Divorce is not an ending. For some people, it's the next step of, okay, I feel empowered to be my better self. Okay. And that's exactly what that journey was for me, was to really hone down, okay, who am I really? Because there was a lot of trauma when I went through the process of marriage and divorce. I mean, it's 10 years of just a lot of downs and a lot of things that I was criticized for and a lot of things that I was shamed for. And when you can't do something right. So divorce for me, and it doesn't look the same for everybody. It is one of those things that it was a very empowering thing. Even though in the beginning, it did not feel that way. It felt messy. It felt, unsafe. It felt really terrible. And there was times where I wanted to go back and say, well, maybe I can fix this with him. Let me just try to figure it out. And I had that mindset because I thought I couldn't live without him. And he always told me, you will never make it without me. I think I'm pretty doing fucking good. Okay. Considering I have a podcast, I just do the things I love. I take care of my children and I run a business on top of me working. So I think I'm doing pretty good in a sense. And sometimes those are the things that you're going to come across, depending on what the circumstance is. And we all want for our special needs kids and to co-parent effectively in a positive way and peacefully and respectfully. My motto is if you keep everything peacefully, short, to the point, and just respectful, there's not really a whole lot that they can say. You just have to drown out the noise and not listen to it when they want to add in more and name call and blame and do other things. There's where you have to shut the door and say the conversation's over. Okay. There is just a lot of patterns that I missed and probably could have stopped the cycle. And I'll tell you, divorce really messes with your mental state. And especially when you've been with somebody who does have narcissistic tendencies, who does have a personality where they like to, pretty much not uplift you, but tear you down constantly. It's really difficult to break through all that and break that type of conditioning that you are under. And I encourage you listening, all you mamas listening to this podcast, it doesn't have to be the end. You will survive after this. You will be able to take care of your children, no problem. Okay? You are a fucking queen and you can do the damn thing. Don't let anybody tell you that you will not survive. Yes, you will. Okay? Women are resilient and we do a lot. And I'll tell you, we can rise above that. And divorce can be just another beginning to the next stage of your life because that's how I see it. So I hope this episode was encouraging for you. I know it's a little longer and I kind of dove in some more about my life, my story, and my journey. And it's something that I will continue to mention and talk about on my podcast. So I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Always, if you have an interesting story or you want to share a story, please send me an email. Everything will be on the show notes. If you're interested in being a guest on the podcast, I love guests. Of course, I had Julia on my podcast. There's a link in the show notes. You fill out the application, come on to the podcast. Would love to talk to you and just share your experience and hear your story. So thank you for listening. I really appreciate every single one of you, and I will chat with you next week.